Hi, welcome to this channel on magnetic energy technology principles applications. This video is about the future of crystal manufacturing. This is highly unconventional information, well, to some degree, but it's becoming more conventional each year. And keep in mind, everything I talk about in these videos is old information. It's decades old. And I'm not giving away any important secrets or to the manufacturing process or anything like that. We've talked about this information for decades, and others have as well. And we are really at the dawn of a new manufacturing process with crystals that will completely revolutionize the world. And that is part of this magnetic energy, etheric magnetic energy model and technology at moving into this crystal age. And hopefully we move into this crystal age sooner than later, because this would be the ideal way in so many ways to run our society. Partly because you don't have any moving parts and you have fields that you're working with, and there's so many advantages to the crystal technology. So I want to cover a few concepts real quick that will be used in this manufacturing process and that people need to keep in mind, especially those that are working in this, because some people watch these videos and I am getting information to them. So please bear with me if you don't care about this, but you can still extrapolate some of this into your own use, even if it's just simply with meditating and stuff with crystals, and also getting ready for this change to take place. Part of this is it's almost like the manufacturing of magnets, where we're going to do a lot of from a conventional point of view, they're going to say electron alignment in the manufacturing process, but it goes so much further than that. And so as this whole manufacturing of crystals takes place with the counter and rotating pulsing magnetic fields, it will become very well established in all these engineering procedures on how to pulse the magnets and how to, like, basically the revolutions, the rate, the pulse rate, and then how you are going to be seeding the magnets. So here are some of the basic concepts. The crystal facet modifications. So it's interesting if you've been into crystals at all, you notice that the facets have like either an odd or an even number. And that's going to really come into play as the crystal manufacturing process in magnetic fields take place, because all of those facets and the geometry of those facets are indicators of vortices of energy. And then we're going to get all the way down to the subatomic structuring. But those facets are very important, especially for polarization. So like if you have an uneven number versus an even number of facets, it will determine how your crystal is manufactured and whether you need a double terminator crystal. And so then the next concept is really moving into like double terminator neutralization. And so here's this process where you start manufacturing crystals, and then halfway through that process you reverse the polarization, and then you create this geometric lattice inside of the crystal that has a balance of energy flow coming in and coming out of it. And it's similar to a magnetic field, except you'll see how it's going to go way beyond that. So even number points don't necessarily, even number facets don't necessarily need a double terminator, because you'll be able to create neutral fields just within the crystal itself. But then as you get into odd number facets, then you might want to have like double terminator crystals. And so that's interesting when you think about that in your own practice. Think about double terminator crystals and what the advantage of those. There's a lot of geometry that's going to be involved in this. And so if you picture like very minute, very small, getting down to that atomic level and that molecular level where we have three-dimensional geometric shapes that are being created in the crystals during the manufacturing process. Now, it will get to the point where they are manufactured intentionally with those geometric structures. But until you get to that level of sophistication, just having the crystals manufactured in the rotating and counter-rotating pulsing magnetic fields will automatically make those geometric shapes form, and those crystalline lattices form inside the crystal. So the next thing is the geometric lattice polarization. And this really has to do with you're kind of moving in a little bit into like nano manufacturing and like what nanomaterials and what nano, like basically seeding can happen in this process. But the geometric lattice polarization really is using the crystalline lattice to create the polarization that you want in that crystal, and then the counter polarization of it so that you achieve balance. The geometric configurations at a molecular level will create a magnetic etheric flow. Okay, so that all by itself will do it. Now, in regular crystals, I mean, they have an etheric magnetic flow as well. But the problem is it's so subtle and it's so random in its process that unless you're quite adept or you have, more sophisticated machinery that you can actually, like sensitive measuring, you can measure it. But for the average person, it just feels like, like just another rock or whatever. But when these types of crystals are manufactured and they're seeded with certain nanomaterials and they have very consistent geometric lattice configurations, you will absolutely feel the energy coming off of the crystals. It'll be very powerful, but let me just go into more things. So the lattice pulse modulation is using the geometric lattice at that molecular level to control the pulse rate that the crystal produces. So for example, you might have, like a whole bunch of buckyballs type of geometric lattice forming in the crystals, but it kind of comes in layers. So you don't necessarily just want that geometric lattice going straight through the whole crystal. Depending on what the use is, you want almost like molecular breaks or molecular gapping in that system. So you might go from one geometry to another geometry temporarily, and then back to that geometry, and then another, and then back to it. And the magnetic pulsing will help create that type of like lattice pulse modulation so that the crystal itself naturally produces certain pulse rates after it's manufactured that way. And it just keeps producing those pulse rates over and over and over and over. Now the next thing is like elemental resonance seeding. So this is really huge because not only will the crystals in the manufacturing process with nanoparticles be seeded with ferromagnetic, paramagnetic, diamagnetic like elements, but also it'll be elements like across the elemental spectrum. And so that seeding is basically like creating the resonant signature that crystal will produce. So here, the simple way to say that is you're essentially making crystal magnets that will attract or repel anything, any type of element in the periodic table, depending on how they're seeded. So, and if you can start to think about what that will do in terms of practical use in our world, it's really becomes very mind-blowing. So you go from this neutral to polarization conversion just based on the geometric structure inside of the crystal, which automatically is drawing energy through it and then pulsing it at a given pulse rate, and then it's seeded with nanoparticles. And depending on what those particles are, it will create the resonant signature that allows it to attract or repel certain elements. And that's huge. So you have basically like crystals that will attract or repel even to the human body or to elements in the human body, and then to essentially any element across the spectrum or anything in our natural environment. This is a very big deal because now when you take crystal resonance combining, you can have different crystals that work together to have different forces and counteracting forces that allow you to do all of those fun things like anti-gravity, force fields, formulation, deformulation, reformulation of matter, creating heat and light and cool and all of these things, so they can be used in transportation, in teleportation, enhancing the human body to do all of the paranormal things that we've heard about in legend, but they become true and they become real and part of our everyday lives with crystals that enhance the human body and enhance all of our natural abilities that are essentially suppressed or not quite online yet because of genetic encoding. So this is a very powerful thing, and these crystals will essentially run our society. They will never run out of power because they are fully engaged in an etheric magnetic flow at all times, and then how they're manufactured will help determine like how they interact with each other and how they interact with people and the environment. So you can have a tremendous amount of force like using like for transportation or whatever it is that you need it for manufacturing process, just from the combination of crystals that are interacting together. And then it opens up the whole world of neutral energy and neutral magnetic energy and etheric energy, and how that is involved in healing in people in the medical industry. And then, so it's just, this is a whole new world that we are just stepping into right now. And crystal manufacturing and manufacturing with magnetic pulsing fields is going to revolutionize this whole idea and create this whole new industry that will change our world and bring us into clean energy and essentially pollution free. Not only that, but then like giving you the ability to clean every form of pollution on this planet using crystal fields, combined crystal fields. And so this is a pretty big deal. And so it's exciting to see that this is starting to catch on in different manufacturing processes around the world, and it's just going to explode and go crazy with this whole revolution of crystal science. And please send in any questions that you have and any comments that you have on other uses or things that you've heard about with the crystal technology, and I will see you again.